You're welcome along. So round 2 has come and gone in this year's Six Nations, and one way or another this tournament just tends to catch you by surprise. So a win for England against France at Twickenham. Elliot Daly with the winning try in the 79th minute. Italy, as expected, first game of the weekend, beat Wales in Rome relatively comfortably, more so than the scoreline suggests. And the Irish run against Scotland continues. 11 wins in a row and counting. Happy to say Ian Madigan with us. Hey Ian.
Hey Joe, how you going? Yeah, really enjoyable weekend of rugby. 3 good contests, and Ireland roll on. The Grand Slam's still alive. The only team that can say that.
I know. I saw it all starting to align a little bit early. So our rugby coverage is with thanks to Energia. They sponsor rugby in Ireland at all levels. Grassroots with the Energia AIL, official partner to Leinster Connacht, the Irish men's and women's teams, and the Energia Rugby for All initiative supports inclusion, welcoming everyone of all abilities to participate in the game. Energia.ie/rugby is where you can find out about their exclusive home energy offers for rugby fans. So let's start with Scotland yesterday. 18 points to 32 against Ireland. It's kind of all the build-up, and then 8 minutes in, Robbie Henshaw scores a try. It's 17-0 after half an hour. Finn Russell, Darcy Graham, both gone. Scoreboard flatters Scotland was one of the points I saw made quite widely afterwards.
Yeah, like as a contest, it was over. Like the last 20 minutes really fizzled out. I was doing commentary for version just for the highlights show, thank God, because I wouldn't wish it on anyone to be commentating on the last 20 minutes when it's away from home and the away team is leading well and the bonus point is boxed off. The Scots are trying to just, put a bit of credibility to that result. But I felt Ireland dominated even when Finn Russell and Darcy Graham were on. They turned the screw with a passage of play in that first half where I think it was started with Keenan puts in a good kick, and then Ireland really apply maximum pressure to the Scots. They ultimately couldn't deal with it. They get that, try to go 17-0 up. Look, we took our foot off the gas and the Scots dominated before and after halftime. But then once we felt the pressure again, it's like, yeah, we've got more gears that we can go to. We then applied pressure, got the points. And when that try from Conan was scored, it was game over at that stage.
Yeah. To get ahead of ourselves, there is a significance here for Irish rugby if the Grand Slam does come into view, in that the Andy Farrell sabbatical is going very well. And if Simon Easterby was to win a Grand Slam and then just return to his old role and bide his time, he's probably hard to displace as next man in waiting. Like this could have a very significant effect on everyone from Ronan O'Gara to others.
Yeah, well, look, he's done a brilliant job. He's really adapted the Irish game, attack in particular within a 2-game period. By him performing well, he'll also give himself options, whether he wants to maybe coach in Wales, coach Australia, coach England. He'll be a man who'll be in demand, and it will be up to Ireland to put together a package to keep him.
Just a broad point, and we'll get into the specifics of yesterday, but you can't not note the record, particularly when you consider this is a good Scottish team now. They have world-class players, and what's more, they beat other teams. So they have won 5 of 7 against England. They have beaten France 5 times under Gregor Townsend. They have 4 wins of 5 against Australia. Why is this rivalry so skewed in Ireland's favour? Why are we their kryptonite to this extent?
I think the biggest thing is we're more powerful, we're fitter, and we have a smarter coaching team. This coaching ticket of Townsend, they've tried multiple ways to beat Ireland. Last year in the Aviva, they came to Dublin thinking, look, if we can keep things tight, if we can suffocate Ireland, maybe we can find our way ahead. And in full credit to them, it was a really good contest from their point of view. It was a brutal game to watch and a tough game to analyse, but I found it interesting to see how Scotland would approach the game this week. And my view was that they were going to try and get in behind Ireland, get an offloading game going, keep the ball alive. But they don't have the power with their ball carriers, and they aren't able to create quick enough ruck ball to do that against a side like Ireland. And I thought our defence looked so comfortable. Like there was only really 2 or 3 passages of play where Scotland got over the gain line on 2 or 3 occasions. Yeah. And anytime they did that, look, they got penalties, they kicked 3 points. But for the other hundreds of phases that they went through, Ireland were pummeling them in the tackle, and we kept driving them back, kept slowing their ball down. And even when they went to that kind of kick contest game, they couldn't really create proper duels in the air. On the flip side, we did.
Yeah. I don't have any doubts what you're saying is right. And yet it's hard not to think France have lots of power. They've beaten them 5 times, like I said. England have plenty of beef, and they've 5 wins of 7. It's just curious. Law of averages, it shouldn't be 11 in a row.
You're right in saying, yeah, the law of averages, you think they'd find a way to win. But when the Irish provinces play the Glasgow or Edinburgh, they go into the games with confidence. I know Glasgow beat Munster last year, but anytime Leinster have had to put in a big performance against a Scottish team or Scottish Glasgow or Edinburgh, they've done that and they've beaten them convincingly. So the Irish players do have a confidence going into play Scotland. There's been no scars in recent past. You know, maybe Peter Manley losing in 2018 is still enough to motivate him, and it certainly looked like that on Sunday. But that does play on your mind when you're kind of going, if we can take this team to this dark place, they won't be able to cope with us. And I think Ireland's fitness played a big part in that.
Yeah. Well, let's start with that. That's a kind of easy point for all of us to see, the fitness, I suppose, the work rate. We saw very little of Ireland in full contact season 1. One of the few clips from the training ground was Farrell stopping training to say, if you're going to try and block the kicker, you block the kicker. Like, it was a first principle stated very clearly. And at the time you kind of think, God, show us something a bit more in depth than that. But when Prendergast and then Porter blocked down those Scottish kickers, when Gibson Park scampers back for that brilliant tackle, him and Lowe handle the what becomes a 2v2 with such intelligence, quick thinking. The work rate is obvious for us all to see, but you have to mention it because it was so decisive. They just looked like a fitter, stronger team. And in rugby, that's kind of, hard to get around if you're on the wrong side of that.
Yeah, and look, fitness can be perceived in multiple different ways, and I'll kind of dive into how that plays out in a rugby match. It's one thing just running around aimlessly and racking up that you covered 10 or 11 kilometers in a game. There's not much value in that. But look, it comes back to Ireland. They compete for everything. They don't let the opposition get a full breath. And you could see that in Scotland. Were just trying to find a moment where they could get a breather, get a good kick away. They were hacking kicks away. They were fighting for their life to even just win the ball back at the breakdown. And I know from how Easterby is coaching them, he'll be going through that game with a fine tooth comb, and he will be saying, look at Andrew Porter here, look at the pressure he puts the Scottish 9 under. Look at Peter O'Mahony on the counter ruck here. It slows their ball down. It gives our defence more time to get set. And then he'll also be looking at, just as an example, he'll say, look at Bundy here. Bundy, could you have put them under more pressure in this instance? And Bundy's obviously going to be like, yes, coach, I could have. And that's going to, you're rewarding players who do it well, and then you're showing instances where players can do it better. And it is such a clear focus for Ireland to do that. But you need to be fit, because like going for a block down requires a huge amount of energy. Chasing back when a line break has happened requires a huge amount of energy. Now, a lot of the guys are doing it week in, week out. For Leinster, it's a clear part of their strategy. But you look at the Gibson Park chasing back in the second half off the back of that line break, huge effort. You look at Doris and Van der Fleer, the effort that they've put in there for the guts of 80 minutes. You look at Keenan, who I know we were bigging him up on the podcast last week, saying he was the best one-on-one tackler. I think he's the fittest rugby player in the world. The ground he covers, which it's one thing saying, look, he doesn't let the ball bounce in the backfield, but he's also covering James Lowe. He's keeping James Lowe fresh. So when the ball does come to Lowe, he can make these big explosive efforts and beat guys one-on-one. If he's running up and down the channel like a wing back covering kick space, and then he gets his hands on the ball, he's not going to be fresh, and we're not going to see these big efforts. And then how the game plays out, the game is still somewhat in the balance. when you're fit, you have a clear thought process. If you're not fit, you're out of breath, you're not going to be able to communicate. The chip that comes from Gibson Park, Keenan spots that space. It's one thing spotting it. It's another thing feeling like you've got the energy in your legs to chase after it. He gives Gibson Park the shout, and then it's an explosive effort to outstrip Kinghorn on the chase back. Big jump, wins the ball, presents it back, game over. That is fitness, and it results in scoreboard points.
Yeah, he is a greyhound. So Lowe's life with him covering behind him means Lowe's not trucking up and down, therefore fresher Lowe. One of the reasons Lowe's probably playing so well.
They dovetail particularly well.
Okay.
They play to each other's strengths.
Okay. Did we see a touch more rush in that Irish defence on Sunday?
I felt we did. I was willing it up every time I saw them catching Scotland behind. It's not as aggressive as we've seen with Leinster, and I think unless Gary Ringrose is there, you're not going to see that kind of slingshot from your 13 and your winger. But there was an aggressive line speed from 30, 40, 50, 60, and they just big emphasis as well on putting 2 in the tackle, which really suffocated Scotland. Any hope they had of getting an offload game going went with that.
Okay. And so would they always put 2 in the tackle, or you do that with an offloading team in particular?
Yeah, with an offloading team in particular, and one first player go low, second player make sure you're suffocating the ball, and then clear bounce to the feet if they get the opportunity to get in and counter ruck and slow the ball down, which Ireland do particularly well. And it just really tires out the opposition. Winning your own ruck ball back, I know we've spoken about it a few times, it is exhausting, and Ireland were far more comfortable defending and tiring the Scots out. And then when we got in possession, we looked so fresh. So
this is back to your point that Ireland, you feel, and you said it last week, are going through fewer phases on the ball because they've somewhere along the way reached the conclusion they're tiring themselves out a touch, so they're more readily kicking after several phases if they're not busting the opposition open. And on yesterday, quite happy to let Scotland do their thing and pick their moment and punch themselves out.
Yeah, and that's part of why we look so fresh. Okay. Like, I know we don't like bringing it up, but if you go back all the way to the quarterfinal of the World Cup, we had 173 carries.
Right.
Okay. And look, we looked tired at the end, but we were a far fitter team than New Zealand. We were just playing the wrong way, the wrong style. And we played in autumn, we tired ourselves out. High phase count, playing to the edges. And Ireland would typically have 2 passes for every carry, which is actually high. And that shows that you're moving the ball to width, because for every 1, you're obviously going to have 3 or 4 passes. So, at the weekend, Ireland had 81 carries.
God, less than half of the quarterfinal.
Less than half. And that comes back to like what Easterby was saying is, when we are in possession, we want to be impactful. And the momentum that the Irish players had coming onto the ball, the deception that we had at the line, which obviously was helped as well with Prendergast playing flat and square to the line, coupled with the centres doing a good job at that.
Yeah.
It just meant that we kept on top of Scotland and we broke them down quickly. Like, there wasn't too many times in the game where we went past 5 or 6 phases without either scoring or getting a penalty.
Okay. Or kicking.
Or kicking, of course, which is also tied in with it. Have we lost momentum? Or ideally, just before you lose momentum, you're sensing that it's seeping away from you. That's the time to get the ball up into the air or go to a long kicking game.
Yeah.
It's when you've lost momentum, it's 1 phase too late. Everyone's on the back foot. You're getting maximum pressures being applied to the person who's trying to get the kick away. You've no momentum in your chase. So.
Okay, that's interesting. So this is like Arsene Wenger selling a player a year before everyone else has realised. They sense it out there, and then they kick on their terms. Because like you wouldn't say, you can't think of too many kicks across the game where kicker's on his back foot, it's not on his terms, and Scotland are running onto the ball. Like, they all felt very much like they were proactive kicks. And
when we were talking last week about like impact tackles, like when the momentum is seeping away from you, most likely then an impact tackle is about to come in from the defence. Off the back of an impact tackle, the team is going to pile in and try and counter ruck and barge, and they're on the front foot now. If they don't win at that breakdown, the pressure that's going to be applied to either the box kick or the kick from the out half is going to be maximal. So and as a result of that, the kick quality, the percentage of it being effective goes down significantly.
So you mentioned last week, you're seeing slightly new style of play and attack. You mentioned the pod of four, which is new for Ireland. I've seen pod of four talked about a lot over the last week. You were ahead of the curve a touch on identifying that one. We like that. But I presume, much like the pod of three working for many years, this will work for now for a year or two, and then tape will start to amass and opposition will get on top of it, and then they'll have to reconfigure their shape. Is that kind of the deal with this kind of stuff?
Yeah, there's an element of cat and mouse with it, and but to win a competition, you ideally need to be the first in something, and you need to be doing it effectively well. It's one thing going to a pod of four and it being effective and changing the variation of your width off 9. It's another thing having the players who have the footballing ability to do that.
Right.
So you can say in a team meeting, you can say, look, this is really good. We go really wide off this one. Great pass there, Gibson Park. And this is where we break them in the middle of the field. And then players are thinking, right, I'm going to call these wide pods off 9 when I get the chance. They're in the game, they call a wide one, it's not on. And they get whacked behind the gain line. Or you go to a short one when you should go to a wide one. So the point I'm making is it requires footballing ability to be able to read a game and know when to do it. It's one thing being able to run the shape. It's another thing knowing when to do it. So it's not like teams can just copy it and go, right, we're going to take that and use it. A lot of work has gone into Ireland, both practicing and executing that shape.
And are many other
ahead of the curve?
Are many other teams using that shape?
No, Bristol. I spotted Bristol using it at the start of the season, and I liked it.
Okay.
And I didn't say a whole lot about it, but Bristol are very novel in how they exit from their own 22. They'll try things. Sometimes they overplay and they get caught, and it really hurts them. But that's something that I saw them doing early in the season, really stretching out, because teams have to cover the backfield when they're in the opposition 22. So you're actually arguably it's the easiest place to attack, because you might only be coming up against 11 or 12 defenders, sure, versus that when you're in the other 22, you're coming up against 14 or 15 defenders.
Okay, so it's a way to stretch limited numbers and then away you go. Yeah. Sam Prendergast then, I mean, there's been obviously very heated debate around Prendergast and Crowley. I mean, it's funny. I just tweeted what I thought was an uncontroversial point, that his place kicking is sweet. What a beautiful strike of the ball. Oof. Well, you don't say that about Crowley. Like, it all gets very contentious. I suppose the fact that the host broadcaster on the day were the BBC and they picked him as man of the match, player of the match, would suggest he did more than just fine. So give us your take on the Prendergast performance.
Yeah, and look, I think people are softening up on it, and I really enjoyed his interview after the game. I thought he gave away a nice bit, showed a bit of personality, and regardless of what province you're from, you're looking at him going, that was a great performance, and that's a really nice interview, and he's representing our country, and credit to him. His performance was excellent. Like there was a couple of kicks last week that we were critical of against England, and Rog was saying, look, you're amped up, your timing can be off slightly. He was just looked relaxed, and his timing on the spirals, he was like a golfer that was just playing a smooth 7-iron as opposed to trying to force a 4-iron, which for me anyway, it usually ends up pretty ugly. And he got his depth right. So when he needed to give himself time, if he was going to an aerial bomb, he'd give himself time. And then he hits the ball so high and so long. It's okay to take an extra second or two when you're getting a kick away. But then when he got on the front foot ball, his ability to soak it right up and take it, he's like a matador. He takes it right to the line. He's brave enough. He can ship late tackles. And then he's a great passing game to unlock defenses. So yeah, look, it was a very, very good performance. The element that I was probably most impressed with is that he's beginning to kind of cut out those mistakes. He's he pulls off a lot of high tariff stuff, but with that, you're going to try stuff and it's not going to work out. He's beginning to squeeze out those errors in his game, and he's looking like a really high percentage guy, but also has the magic to pull off the fantastic.
Yeah, he cited the influence of Sexton in that post-match interview on RTE, not least with his place kicking as well. So, I mean, like, to have that brain to pick is phenomenal for him. No one is under the illusion that he's filled out yet, and that when he fills out that frame, he'll be a big man. But obviously, he's light in defence, and I don't know, is his tackle technique good? Does he love tackling? Is this a thing that a player can develop? Like I spoke to one former player who once said, like, if you don't love tackling, it's very hard to ever love tackling. So he's going to be analysed now, and he can expect traffic.
Yeah, and he will get traffic regardless of being a good defender or a weak defender. As a 10, You're going to come after that channel, because the 7 inside you and the 12 outside you are always going to be better defenders than you. At 6'4", it was mad seeing him standing beside Stephen Ferris after the game and Jamie. It was just, I struggled to believe that he was 6'4", but he is. That actually can go against you at out half, because you've got bodies coming at you with real momentum. If you dip and try and drive them back with your shoulders, you're just going to get a huge amount of weight coming through you. The technique that I will be using will be going low and trying to pull guys over you, so you're not actually making any real impact. You're just like Pritt stick is what we used to call it. So the person falls long over the top of you, and that actually creates a good poaching opportunity. What I'd say about him in the tackle is, he's brave. Like he missed a few at the weekend, but he's given it a good go. And what that means is, at least he's influencing the attacker. They've had to do a fair bit to get away from him, which means the likelihood of someone else tackling that person goes up significantly. It's out halves who are afraid of the contact, and they're moving backwards and they're moving away. And if they miss a tackle, when that happens, there's no one either side of you that can help you out. Prendergast gets forward. If he gets beaten, there's Irish players in behind him that can cover him. I don't see his defence being a big issue. But he's competing against a guy whose defence is excellent.
Yeah.
Crowley's a really, really good defensive 10.
Yeah. So that Pritt stick type tackle, you're almost letting the opposition momentum continue, and you're basically falling backwards, taking their legs in effect, and they fall, and your teammates will get to know that that's your technique, and as you said, poaching opportunity, because he could be a bit isolated, and that'll work okay. That'll be just fine. Yeah,
the challenge for Sam is that his communication before each phase plays out is really important. So if it's off a scrum, connecting with his 9, connecting with his 12, making it clear who he's on, off line out with the likes of Josh off the back of the line out, having a clear strategy going into the game. When the opposition runs this play, I will go low. If you can come in and wrap up the ball, or in this instance, if you can come in low and I'll wrap up the ball, that suits me better in this instance. Okay. And the better he can do that, his defensive stats will improve significantly.
Is he a live contender to go on the plane to Australia?
Has to be. If you go through who he's competing against, I can't see Wales putting someone forward for the out half slot, so we'll draw a line there. In England, Marcus Smith was a genuine contender. I think off the back of Finn Smith's performance at the weekend, I think they'll stick with Finn Smith at out half. So that affects Marcus's stock, to get into that out half slot. And then, Finn Russell has the experience and is a really high quality player. I thought Prendergast played well against him when Leinster were playing Bath. Obviously, it's very unfortunate that Finn had to go off injured, and I would still say that Finn is ahead of him in the race.
Yeah.
But not only is Prendergast putting his name in for one of the 3 10 slots, he keeps going the way he's going, Joe. He's going to be running Andy Farrell's game plan. He could be the one that starts.
Wow. Owen Farrell will get a pick, won't he?
I'm not too sure if he will. I think he'd need to find really good form for Racing in the second half of the season. He had a nasty groin injury, which has kept him out. He's only played a handful of games. Racing have had a poor season thus far.
Yeah.
He would need to catch some momentum. One thing that goes in Farrell's favour is Racing are doing poorly, and they most likely won't make the barrage. If you're playing for the likes of Toulouse, you're going to miss half the tour, and that will affect the likes of Willis, Kinghorn, because of their lack of availability.
It was interesting, obviously, for the last 10, 15 minutes that Crowley came on and we thought, okay, Prendergast job done, and Prendergast stayed on. Crowley went to 15, and as you've been prophesying for several months now, Hugo Keenan was moved to the right wing. So you were this is what I'm trying. This is what I've been saying, everyone. I guess there's a parallel. We'll come on to England in a moment with Marcus Smith going to 15 and Finn Smith at 10. You have two playmakers on the pitch. Do we think this is a good solution, viable for certain games, good for certain games, or just listen, the game was won last 10 minutes, let's just try it for the crack? Is this something that might really happen routinely?
I don't think it's something that Ireland will look at to bring in for, let's say, France, for example.
Yeah.
No, and I'm not too sure why they did it. I'd imagine maybe Nash was cramping up or something like that. But and they're obviously keen to get Crowley on, fully deserved to get a run. But no, I don't think there's a whole lot in that from a strategy point of view. I think it works for England, and more than happy to kind of dive into why it works for them.
And why not Ireland?
We're not reliant on that second playmaker. Our style of play is very different.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. One last one from that game, just to note this, because I think we really have to point this out to people. The HIA, I think, has been an issue for the game for some time. You listen to people like Barry O'Driscoll down the years, and he obviously knows a lot more than us, and he would state unequivocally that the HIA and return to play protocols have no scientific standing. He thinks this is like a cod. No scientific standing is what he says. Obviously, others disagree with him. But the comments of Gregor Townsend wouldn't inspire total confidence. He said of Finn Russell and not sending him back out onto the pitch, we decided it wasn't right. He had passed his HIA, but there were a couple of things that he was not remembering about plays. You're thinking, that doesn't give you total confidence. It was a kind of sickening head clash. Here's a guy who can't remember things he was working on during the week. I don't know what his base level is. Maybe Finn Russell always struggles to remember plays. You have to include that as a possibility. But clearly they felt he wasn't remembering plays the way he was pre-game. And still the game, the officials are saying, Finn, out you go into a test match arena, throw yourself around again. That's what the HIA says. And Gregor Townsend going public with this is noteworthy. He didn't have to volunteer this. This is him saying in a very subtle way, that's the system. Yeah,
that's the system, but it's also a subtle way of going, look how responsible I am.
There's no doubt he's getting kudos.
Yeah.
And I, not to talk about him specifically, but if he couldn't remember what he had for breakfast, but he could remember the plays, do you put him on then?
No, not good.
If it's a World Cup final and Finn can remember the plays, but he can't remember what he had for breakfast, that puts the coach in a very tricky position. So
very much so.
This is where the game is letting down everybody.
Yeah, and parts of that story don't stack up. Like the parts of the concussion test is a memory test, and then it's also like at the discretion of the doctor who's taking it. So look, if players have done these tests multiple times, you've got to remember 10 words, and if you get below 7, you fail. Like that's an example of what it is. Maybe he has passed that, but concussion's a funny thing. It also can present itself at different times. You can come off and actually get through it okay, and 10 minutes later you get hit with like some horrible symptoms. You can also not have any symptoms, and the following day you get hit with them. So it's just not an exact science in any way. I've been part of many trials. We did a saliva one when I was in the UK, and I was hopeful that could work. The latest one that I'm hopeful for is an eye test. But I think it needs to be something physical, because like the gum shields, the sensors in them, I've seen guys just be glanced and be knocked out, and I've seen guys put in the biggest hit I've ever seen and be totally fine.
Right. Yeah. And your point there about the kind of varied nature of the way concussion lands with people is almost the point Barry O'Driscoll's making. Like, this isn't within 10 minutes. The full reality of the concussion is laid bare. I mean, it can happen half an hour afterwards, the next day, and then this is I have sympathy because it's hard. Like, the HIA test, they're doing their best, but let's not kid ourselves that this thing is watertight. It's just not.
No, and the biggest thing I'd say in it, and I only learned this in the second half of my career when I kind of realized how serious concussion was and attitudes were changing. If you see someone get a significant blow, or you sense that they are not right, pull them out. Like, and that's not just the professional game. And you will see pros now pulling guys and saying to a coach, he's not right. I'm communicating with him on the pitch. He's slurring his words or he's forgetting things. Get him off. You know, and that should be no different for, you know, mini rugby that boys and girls are playing at the weekend. You gotta just trust your instincts. Don't rely on these tests. They can definitely capture some concussions, but let's not put our life on it.
Again, I'm no doctor, I stress that, but when I saw the collision, I thought, well, they're both done.
Yeah. Like, oh, totally.
Remember Nick White came back on after stumbling because he passed his HIA and it was big furore. I would have said on that clash, you know what? I think you're both done. Just look at it. We don't need to do a HIA. And that was what disappointed me. Leave the HIA. Get them both off. They were both, you know, Darcy Gray went to hospital with concussion. He was especially bad. But you just know Finn Russell is a major risk.
Part of the reason why they would do the HIA is that if he performed particularly badly on it, then they might go, you're out for 3 weeks now. So it's a marker for how they treat the concussion. It's not only just to get yourself back on the pitch. So, obviously I'm out of the game now a year and a half. I'm sure it's changed since I left, but like stuff like stumbling, holding your head after a collision, staying motionless on the ground, these were all things that were only brought in the last 2-3 years that I was playing. So look, there's a long way for it to go. But it's a worrying part of the game.
Yeah. In some ways, that last point is the damning one. Look how much it keeps changing, this science. And every couple of years, 14-day return, no 6-day return. This kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Final word in Ireland, or anything that you didn't like, that worried you? Are you chalking this up as just a really brilliant performance?
If you're nitpicking, you know, you'd say, look, with 10 seconds on the clock, we got to close that out before half time. Go a phase, kick the ball off. It was a particularly good tackle by Darge. And then, look, we lose our concentration at the start of the second half. But to beat France, we're going to have to play the way we did, in the sense that we need to suffocate France. The likes of Dupont, Bielbury, Penno. That's what we're going to have to do to win them. So we have a good blueprint. We just need to do it even better to beat France, because they're a wounded beast now and they'll be looking to prove a point.
Well, they sure are. So let's talk about their implosion at Twickenham, 26 points to 25. I guess if France drop as many balls in Dublin, then we'll be okay. It was extraordinary.
Yeah, it was. It was, you know, Penno himself, I think, left potentially 21 points out there.
Dupont on the touchline.
Sorry?
The Dupont one on the touchline.
Dupont one on the touchline. Yeah, like best player in the world dropping that, you don't see it. There was a bit of a laissez-faire attitude from the French. And I don't say this often, but I was actually delighted for England. You know, I don't buy it when people go, oh, that game's played 10 times, France win 9 of them. I hate that phrase. England won the one that mattered, and they hung in there, and that's what you got to do. Look, France are a better team than England, but that doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to win the match. And England hung in there for dear life. And they also had a clear plan, and they stuck to it. And the plan ultimately worked, you know. Short kicking game, keep turning the French, frustrate them, contest at the breakdown. And it's been a tough run for England. Yeah, you know, I feel for Borthwick, lots of narrow losses. And yeah, that was a good win and put a smile on my face at the end of it.
When you say the French were laissez-faire, what are the kind of things you're seeing that make you think that? It wasn't like their lives depended on it to score a try. Their
attitude with their passing, their catching, their patience, it just wasn't there for me. They didn't care enough. Whereas England, on the other side of the ledger, their lives actually did depend on it. They knew that if they lost that game and lost against Scotland, people were losing their jobs, and that showed.
It's very disappointing, really, from a French perspective. They have won one championship under Galtier. This team has not won nearly enough for the talent, and yet they're kind of laissez-faire. It's inexplicable, really.
Yeah.
Like if an Irish team went out with that kind of attitude, we'd all be kind of hopping. Whereas the French, it's like, hey, come on, we're French. But it's so unprofessional.
Yeah, it is unprofessional, but it's in their nature. And there was a bit of a trap in the sense that they thumped England, 50 odd points 2 years previously in Twickenham. They beat Wales really comfortably. Toulouse are flying, Bordeaux are flying in the Champions Cup. They go into that game and they're just thinking, we just need to do the same again and we'll be totally fine. But England knew the plan that France were going to be going into that game with. And they had a plan to counter it, and it worked. It frustrated the French.
One thing that I was very struck by is in the build-up. So Finn Smith comes in at 10. We'll talk about Finn in a moment, and Marcus Smith goes to 15. And the logic that a lot of analysts had in advance of the game was, well, the French kick long, so Marcus, slightly smaller man, not least compared to Freddie Stewart, won't have to deal with contestables.
Yeah,
and I thought, geez, that makes sense. And he's a running threat, and he did run really well when they kick long to him. I was like, listen, I'm clearly no rugby oracle. Couldn't stress that enough. Would you not give him a few contestables? Like, why not give this guy what he doesn't want? I just couldn't believe that.
Yeah, but they didn't change their strategy when Smith came in. Part of it is France kicked the ball long because they kicked the ball incredibly well long, and they've probably the best kicker or kick tenniser, as you'd call it, in Ramos. He's really good at fielding the ball. Best guy at executing a 50-22. He kicks the ball an absolute mile. The English or the French pack need to be looked after. They don't want to use up loads of energy. So that is part of that strategy.
Okay.
And yeah, it's been interesting in this Six Nations, the different kick strategies that have come in. Like you look at the Ireland-England game, Ireland focused on getting the ball off the pitch. They wanted to contest the English line out. They didn't want an aerial contest up at the likes of Stewart and Freeman. They probably felt that England had a good edge there. Italy and Wales, Italy clearly backed themselves early. So they just wanted to create contests. They either got up, won the ball, created breaking ball, or the person catching it got absolutely smashed and it was really slow, awful ball for Wales to attack. France kicked the ball long, so they had a clear plan there, but England's strategy was to actually run the ball back, go a phase or two, and then put a short kick in, turn the French. That is tiring.
Yeah.
You're coming up in the defensive line. The ball then goes in behind you. You got to sprint back. You got to refine your shape. When you put those short kicks in, everyone's in a good defensive shape. Even if you don't, so you don't win the ball back a lot of the time, but you're on the front foot.
Sorry, the kicking team are in a good defensive shape.
Yeah, they're exactly, because you only have to run, 15, 20, 25 meters. You're talking to each other on the run.
Yeah. And
the opposition are running back to then turn around and get whacked.
Yeah.
So,
no fun
and
to
the
play
French
against.
did look disjointed. And then the icing on the cake was when Smith goes to that short kick. Like, that's pre-planned. Like, Freeman's, I think, 6'4", 6'5". Bielbury, as good as he is, I don't know, is he 6 foot? Perfect kick.
No.
Give him a chance. You've got 6 inches on him, and that's all Freeman needed. Gets up over the top of him, and when that try was scored, you're thinking, geez, maybe it is going to be England's day.
Have they found it now with Finn Smith at 10 and Marcus at 15, or TBC?
I think TBC on who they're playing against, but England traditionally are a side that craves structure from their out half. And if you look at that last try there, off the maul, goes out the back, the standard play, 9 to 12, out the back to 10. If that's Marcus Smith, he can do multiple different things. Like, he's probably quicker than Finn, better sidestep, more explosive. But Finn is a system guy, and I'd say he's very easy to play alongside. You can see the likes of Freeman, and Slideholm, they love playing alongside him in Northampton. And for Daly on the wing, what he needs from Smith there, he needs to know exactly what he's going to do, where he's going to turn up. I'd say if they ran that play 50 times, Smith would do it pretty similar each time. And then he throws in the bit of class with the pumping the pass long to throw Bielbury slightly on the outside. And then he just leaves it up perfectly. But Daly didn't have to break stride. And I thought that was systematic of England's play. There was multiple times where they got the ball out of the shape and the two runners coming off Smith, they knew exactly where he was going to go, how he was going to square up. And I think that suits England for where they're at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard Will Greenwood make the point that name me a World Cup winning team that had a mercurial out half versus facilitator, organised, dependable.
Yeah, well, Finn Russell's never won anything. Like, as good as he is, and I'm his biggest fan, but he hasn't won many competitions. Maybe he's won a URC. I'll probably be correct that the Scots are always on my back.
They're on everyone's back. And a last one, Marcus at 15. Is that where he's going to find his home? I keep forgetting this guy, by the way, is 25, nearing 50 caps, and we talk about him like he's a 22-year-old just finding his way. So it's kind of now he needs to find a way at test level.
Yeah, he does. And while he played well at the weekend, his stock probably went down with Finn Smith's going up. And there's good competition there. Like, if you're playing against a team that's going to go to an aerial contest, probably going to pick Stewart. Furbank is also a similar kind of second set of hands ball player. So you're ending up in an arm wrestle there. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. But Marcus is high quality, and he'll fight hard for either position. He's also a really good guy to bring off the bench, and sure. I don't mean that he should be on the bench, but hell of an impact player either at 10 or 15.
Yeah, quite striking the way he snatched the two kicks, almost replicas, the place kicks.
Yeah, the way he sets the ball up, he kind of tries to trap it with his foot, and if you come in around the back of the ball, it can turn into a snap hook really quickly. Yeah. Whereas the tee that I used elevated the ball higher, and it meant that snap hook was very difficult to do. Thank God for me. But those lower tees, you can be a fraction off, and it can really get away from you right to left. It's also, I think, important to note as well, Joe, like the 60 seconds for the conversion, I think it's a bit tight on time.
What babies? Stop now. Go away.
I know, but
no. My life's too short to sit around waiting for you to do breathing and do all your nonsense.
No, I know, but
deal with it. We're moving on.
Yeah, even just another 5 or 10 seconds, I just think it's a tiny bit tight. If it's a really big passage of play, you've put in a huge effort. By the time the ball gets to you and the tee comes on, you're left with like 20 seconds.
Yeah, well, that's fair. The ball taking its time to get to you is perhaps unfair because that's beyond your control.
Yeah.
Strikes me, by the way, as a 10 now, like, big moments. Say the Elliot Daly one, for instance, was kind of, he went in well wide of the posts. As a 10 now, you can't celebrate anymore. Your days of running over, high five, you are straight like robotic into my routine.
Yeah. No, completely. Yeah. And you're also saying to your other players, like if I was there now, I'd be saying in the team meetings, well, first off, I always would have said it, get it as close to the post as possible. Every yard, every inch counts. I just want it closer to the post, regardless of how well I'm kicking. Give me every chance. And then when you score the try, don't be celebrating kicking the ball into the stand. Get it back to me ASAP. Otherwise, you'll be hearing about it.
Yeah. So Ireland from that performance, take what? With the view to round 4. That short kicking game, turn them, make them tired. That sounds good. Throw a bit of that in.
Yeah, very kicking game is what I'd say. And then it's maximum pressure on Dupont. He's still the key guy. England. People say, "Oh, Dupont had a bad day." England made him have a bad day. He's the same player. England put a system in place that he didn't enjoy. Didn't feel like he had time or space. Now, he still came up with some big moments, and that one at the end where he throws it over the top to Penno and he runs down. That's where Ireland need to be switched on. Like Lawrence switches off on the edge. It looks like Dupont, for all money, is running up a dark alley, and then out of nowhere, spots that Lawrence has drifted in. He just floats it over the top, and 10 seconds later, England are under the post. the key for Ireland is they need to nearly man mark them, and the players in and around them need to be switched on for the 80 minutes. You just cannot give that guy any opportunities.
Before you go, then, you were on commentary on the TV for Italy 22, Wales 15. Italy in the, I think, unprecedented position of being strong favourites ahead of a Six Nations game. It was 6-7 points in the spread. Wet conditions. You mentioned already Italy went aerial and backed themselves in a contest, and that worked well. They were 19-3 up at one stage, so people could look at the scoreline and say, 22-15, Wales tried to go the length to score an equaliser and think it was a lively game. It was a reasonably drab affair until maybe the last 5-10 minutes. Italy in control here.
Yeah, it was a tough game to commentate on.
Well, I wouldn't turn off now. That's all I'm saying, John, said Ian at 19-3.
And here we are lining up for another box kick. Look, we did our best, but
no sport is as affected as rugby by weather. Like wet day, it's just because funny. Rob beside me in the studio was like, wet day, this is gonna be tough.
Yeah, and like I think for people who haven't played, like what a wet ball affects speed of pass. You end up having to catch the ball on your body as opposed to catching it away from your body. Your ball carry is affected because you're worried about the ball being hit out of your hands. You're so conscious on just holding onto the ball that you're not going to even consider an offload. And then the biggest one that I would have had as an out half when it was, let's say it's lashing rain in the warm-up, I would be going around saying, pass the ball off the line. So give the players opportunity to catch the ball before they go into contact. And that would have reduced the number of knock-ons that we would have had, but it also would have had a negative effect on our attack. It means that soft shoulders, line breaks, greatly affected. So as a result, you're going to get a far different quality game to look at. But yeah, like I thought Italy had a clear plan. They played well against Scotland. Like they made Scotland sweat, got it to draw a game after 60 minutes, and then clear plan of how they were going to beat Wales. That was what was clear. Their number one goal at 19-3. And Wales had Josh Adams in the bin. I was expecting Italy to start playing a bit and try and forge on, try and get that fourth try, albeit they only had one at the time. They didn't. And then they actually gave Wales a chance. And that's what we've seen a lot from Italy. They're not a team that have the ability to forge ahead. To win a game, they need to kind of win on the finishing line. And the weekend was no different.
Yeah.
And as a result, I don't see them beating England, France, or Ireland.
As for Wales, Ireland go to Cardiff in round 3. There's a gap week now, and then round 3 is upon us. I don't know what weighting you want to give the Cardiff factor. Increasingly, they get beaten at Cardiff every bit as much as away from home. Literally never in the history of rugby as an Irish team gone there, and it's like, well, how much... I mean, I'm jinxing Ireland here. I know it sounds so arrogant to say it, but you just have to talk about what you're seeing. How much will Ireland win by? That's the discussion, not will Ireland win. That's the reality based on what we've seen.
Are you asking me because
you can disagree that maybe it's a big banana skin and I'm
No, it's not. Oh, I don't at all. Like they win by 25 if Wales play like a kick chase game. If Wales continue to play the way they are and trying to run around the corner, like Ireland probably win by 40 or 50. That's the reality. We are so much better than Wales at the moment. And the style of play, we were talking earlier in the show of, carrying around the corner and high phase count. And Wales are still playing that way. The game has moved on. And then you couple that with them just having such limited players as regard speed and power. So I just struggle to see how they put together a game plan that's going to challenge Ireland. Obviously, look, you go after the line out. You hope for moments of magic from Thomas Williams. And they did have some chances against Italy in the first half, a bouncing ball twice. Maybe they score those tries from the kick-throughs, but I just don't see Ireland giving them those opportunities.
Okay. Brilliant stuff. Our time is up. That was great. Where are your glasses today, by the way? I've come to love seeing myself in your glasses as I talk to you.
Yeah. Left them off today. I'll bring them back next week.
Yeah, bring them back next week.
Bring them back.
Don't mind the haters.
Yeah.